Let's start the lecture. Of course, you are endless in your desires to learn something from me, but it's time to start our conversation. As the song goes, God is always with us. He's in our hearts. Isn't it great? This is how a person should think. This resonates. This is pure, right thinking. And this applies not only to faith, it applies to the nature of human ego in general, because a person should overcome fate precisely in this way. There is always selfishness in love. For example, a mother always loves her daughter very much. The daughter gets married and her husband loves her. A woman is like a river. She flows somewhere. And when a woman starts to flow towards her husband, she no longer flows towards her parents. The mother suffers the most from this because she loses the close relationship. The daughter will no longer communicate with her as closely and for as long as before. As a result, a severe conflict arises between the wife's mother and the husband, between the mother-in-law and the husband. A conflict arises, and they find explanations. They find a reason. If you look at any of these conflicts now, you'll find the reasons. And there is only one reason. It's unshared love, because love has a selfish nature. If someone in a relationship is capable of self-sacrifice, for example, how should a woman treat her husband's parents? She must make many times more effort to befriend them than her own. In this case, the family will be strong. Because when disagreements start, parents always have an impact. The parent's heart is set in such a way that they understand that a person is good, but still pull their child back and separate people. 20% of divorces are due to the fault of parents and relatives. The setback in a relationship happens by fate. For every couple, there always comes a moment when they face difficulties. It happens to all people. And when there are problems in the relationship, where does the woman go? She has to go to her relatives because there is no contact with her husband. She goes to her relatives and they immediately pull her to their side. The spouses become more and more distant from each other. That's it, the relationship is over, divorce. The same goes for men. His relatives immediately start pulling him to their side. His mother says, "Why are you living with her? You're such a handsome guy. Find someone better. Why suffer?" Those whose parents have spoken like this, raise your hand. Yes, everyone's parents have said this, I'm sure. Some just aren't raising their hands. Because your own child always seems better. Any mother sees more purity in her own child. She has known her child since childhood. She doesn't know someone else's child, so she doesn't see purity in them. But if a person is able to see good even in someone who is on the other shore, it means if, let's say, a woman is able to love her husband's mother very much, to really be friends with her. And if a man is able to love his wife's mother and befriend her, the strength of the family increases many times over. It's like having not just one row of fortification around a city, but several rows of fortification. It's practically impossible to conquer such a city. Do you understand the system? Because of my mother-in-law, I endure all her whims. This is how life should be built. We have to learn to perform this feat, to love the parents of your loved one. Also through the parents of your loved one, you can understand the strength of the family, your potential. For example, people think they have super feelings, super relationships, but there is also the concept of reserve protection of the family. The reserve capabilities of a family are always determined by relationships with not my relatives, but the relatives of my loved one, my relationships with them. Well, that means if I have good relationships with them, and my wife has good relationships with my parents, then the family has very strong potential. Because at first destruction begins with the spouses themselves, and then relatives restrain their destructive impulses. It means they persuade them to stay together if the relationships are built right. And I've seen this in Eastern countries. It works so much you can't even imagine. In India, for example, there's only 1% of divorces in total. Now it's 2%. It was 1, now it's 2. So according to statistics, 90% of their families are preserved as a result of the influence of relatives. Imagine 90%. I came across a case where people I know were in a very difficult situation. They were consulting with me as a specialist. The situation was that the man, under the influence of his mother, gradually began to distance himself from his wife. He sent her back to her parents. In that country, if you declare, "I'm getting a divorce," and the wife doesn't agree, but you still divorce, you can be put in jail for this. Can you imagine? That man secretly, like, "I'm not getting a divorce, everything is fine," sent his wife to his parents and doesn't want to take her back. That's why they live in different cities. There's a huge distance between them. And he's like, "Well, live there for a while, live there some more." And she's already worried, called him. He doesn't answer the phone and so on. That's the situation. The parents of both spouses occasionally cross paths in business, and they gradually lured this husband to come to this city for business. He didn't stay with them, but somewhere else. Then an interesting thing happened. About 70 relatives from the wife's side came to talk to him, and they talked to him for about 18 hours. They told me that at first they just had dinner together, had fun, then they explained to him that he had to return to his wife. Then they threatened that he wouldn't leave this room at all if he didn't take her back. Then they promised that if he takes her back, they will help him in business and in everything, and his life will be just perfect. In general, for 18 hours, they wore him down completely. He definitely decided to return and took his wife back. He took her back, and now they live fine. He just realized that if he sends her there again, it will be the same. 18 hours with 70 people. It's just unrealistic to endure. You see, that's the kind of culture. For us, on the contrary, it's like he left, and it's fine. People there understand that if a family's destroyed, everything is bad. It's only going to get worse from there. They understand this. But we don't understand this at all. A marriage fell apart? Well, it's not a big deal. You'll find another one. We have a complete madness in this regard. People don't understand at all what's happening, although they used to understand. Take 50 years ago. God forbid if someone's family falls apart. Everyone helped. Everyone tried to negotiate. Even at work, this situation became the subject of conversation and attention. This was also the case in Tsarist Russia. It was unacceptable to abandon a close person. Such a scandal, such devastation in life was afterwards. Everyone looks at you like you're a freak. And what do people do nowadays? The reason is the lack of knowledge. There's no education in this area, none at all. Before, imagine, in schools, people explained to children how to live in a family. There were special lessons. Girls were taught with girls and boys with boys. They were taught how to behave in life. There were moral lessons and so on. There was even religious education from school age. This was not only in Russia, it was like this in all countries, but now all of this has been decided to be buried all over the world. As a result, the number of divorces is growing at a terrifying rate all over the world. The most terrible thing is that there are certain layers of degradation, like degradation of people's birth, because there is this concept that if you are born into a society where moral chaos reigns, the likelihood of a good fate for people is reduced. That means that there are certain 3 stages of degradation in human development. And even if a person was born with a character at the 3rd stage, they can still return back. They can have a good character and come back to the right things. But for this, they have to work on themselves for some time. Not for long, maybe 5 years, and they return back. So the first stage of degradation is such that a woman acquires female flaws. They are strongly expressed in her. What are these female flaws? These are touchiness, vulnerability, capriciousness, strong sensitivity, strong sickliness, laziness, irresponsibility, hysteria, passivity, weak will, isolation from people, intolerance of other people, and so on. This is the first stage of a woman's degradation, female flaws. For a man, the first stage of degradation is irascibility, stubbornness, straightforwardness, rudeness, coarseness, harsh inner style, inability to relax and relieve tension. This is the image that has emerged. Such a harsh lifestyle for a man. It means he is such a harsh person himself. This is already a sign of degradation. A man should not be harsh. He should be firm, brave, strong, but calm, balanced, responsive, caring, and so on. He should be a humble person, but at the same time strong-willed. A man should have such a character. As a result of people living wrong, a man who has masculine flaws on the first level and doesn't work on himself is born as a woman in the next life. Because a man always gravitates towards a woman, and whatever a person gravitates towards, that's what they get in the next life. A man who dreams of a woman becomes a woman in the next life, but a woman with male flaws. If a person hasn't overcome themselves in this life, then in the next life it becomes more difficult because he is born as a woman, but the character flaws have not changed. And he is born as a woman with male character flaws. What kind of woman will she become at the second level? And a woman accordingly is born as a man with female character flaws. This is already the second level of degradation that goes through the second generation. And what kind of degradation is this? The woman becomes rough. She is drawn to work, not drawn to home. She becomes unyielding, with a harsh, brave, kind of reckless style. She becomes very tense and unable to relax. She begins to experience severe disorders of female reproductive functions. Because a woman with male flaws already has hormonal disorder by definition, it's very difficult for her to have normal female hormonal health. She tries to be socially independent, cannot submit to a man, and wants to dominate in relationships. Usually a woman has a strong desire for personal happiness and comfort. Women at the second stage have a strong male desire. A man's natural flaw is his desire for intense sex. And at the second stage, a woman begins to desire sex very much. She wants sexual relations even more than her husband. That means such a harsh style in relationships, inner independence, desire for strong social development, unwillingness for family, home, detachment from this idea. For such a woman, family is in second place and social development is in first place. A man at the second level of flaws is lazy, touchy, very sensitive, wants to stay at home more, doesn't want to work. He likes women's affairs. Well, rather, he doesn't really like them. Maybe he just likes being at home. He likes subtle pleasures. He likes to decorate himself somehow and so on. So that's the picture. Do you see it? The third level of degradation, thank God, is not very common in our country yet. But in other countries, a wave has already started. Because at the third level of degradation, a person returns back to their gender, but already a little differently. So let's say if a woman has male flaws, character traits, then she is born as a man in the next life. But at the same time, the man who is not realized as a woman, meaning he is a man, but he has female desires. Before, the woman had male flaws, but to some extent, the man also had female desires, and the woman had male desires, so to speak. But strong development of desires of the opposite sex leads to love for one's own sex. So prior to this, the woman wanted to work more and dominate the family. In the next stage, being born as a man who can no longer look at women. This man cannot look at women, he looks at men because unrealized desires of a woman live in him. He didn't work through it there, and it has accumulated so much in him that he doesn't have the strength, the mental strength for a woman. He cannot tolerate her emotions, and therefore it's easier for him with a man. He is completely weak. An unrealized man finds it easier to live with a man. That culture that promotes same-sex marriages, we have the right there, everything else. All this indicates this third level of degradation, where people already cannot tolerate the opposite sex. A woman cannot tolerate men, she becomes extremely sensitive, and women are divided into two categories. Some women are very sensitive, and they cannot digest men at all with their tense character. Other women have a very dominant nature, and they also cannot digest men, so it turns out that one woman behaves like a woman, and the other like a man. With men too, one man behaves like a woman, the other like a man, but already with men, not with women. That's how this same-sex culture comes up. Moreover, these people are so deeply immersed in this idea of same-sex culture that they begin to change history. For example, they made Alexander the Great gay. I read the Chronicles. Alexander the Great was a very ascetic person. He slept on damp ground. He was very faithful to his wife. He never robbed anyone. He was very strict with his warriors, but at the same time he loved them very much, and they loved him very much. He kept only brave warriors near him. If he saw that someone was not brave, he did not allow them to fight in his army. It was an honor to fight alongside him. He always went first into battle. An army of 40,000 defeated a 350,000 army of Persians. This is a historical fact. 40 and 350. Do you feel the difference? It's like a grain of sand in the ocean. They simply formed a wedge and reached the ruler. Passing through half the army, they got to the ruler and forced him to flee. And then the army followed him, leaving the entire force completely demoralized. Can you imagine people used to have such strength back then? And they made a Hollywood movie about this person. They portrayed him as gay there. These people are trying to change culture and history to suit themselves. They are now trying to prescribe education for children in such a way that we no longer address each other as boys and girls. So what should they call each other? Buddy? Or parent 1 and parent 2. Girls can wear boys' clothes, boys can wear girls' clothes, however they want in general. And it's strictly monitored that, God forbid, someone dares to object. Parents are immediately taken to court and deprived of parental rights if they are against this culture. But this is not in all countries, though such things already exist. It all starts with juvenile justice. That means first they introduce a law that children cannot be punished, and then they start pushing through this justice system. These laws impose sex education on children. They tell children about sexual relations. According to the Vedas, if a child learns about sexual relations at an early age, when their psyche is not mature, they simply burn out from this information. This is from 12 years old. It's very pronounced in the teen years now. Children up to about 18 years old simply go crazy, and I can tell you there's only one reason for this. It's sexual energy. When children have uncontrolled perception of sex through the internet, through everything, they are kind of bound and see all this information. Now you just need to type 3 letters on the internet and everything comes out immediately with terrible force. And children's minds can't handle it because such strong energy is coming at them that their psyche simply explodes and they start piercing their ears, nose, making a mane on their head. This is simply an attempt to somehow stand out and show themselves as somehow stronger or better than others. Because they can't do it from the position of personal development, they're just children, their mind is weak. Therefore, it's very important to understand how to live properly in general. What to watch, what not to watch, what's good, what's bad. We need to understand this very seriously now. Everything is mixed up now. For example, I remember 40 years ago, children had toys. If it was a good character, it was beautiful and kind, like a good, kind bogatyr. And bad ones, for example, were some evil, ugly characters. Now, good characters have a terrible appearance, as if they are just some kind of monsters. And even the word monster is already considered good, meaning there are good little monsters, there are bad monsters. This sense of good and evil is all distorted in children's consciousness, and therefore now parents should think very hard about what to show their child. 100%, we need to start by introducing family censorship on movies, viewings, and everything else. This is not only for children, but also for adults. We need to watch religious, spiritual, and moral films. Look for cartoons with more moral culture. We have to do the licensing. What we watch as a family, what our child watches. And when this licensing is in place, the child will develop a sense of purity and filth, and they will then be disgusted by filth on their own. That's how my child grew up. My daughter was disgusted by the filth. She didn't want it. She didn't like all of this. She understood where it was clean and where it was dirty. She communicated with those children who were cleaner in this culture, and didn't communicate with those who were dirtier. Parents should instill this culture in children through their own lives. We need to show children the right taste for life, the right taste for things. Although 90% of films now are under the influence of spirits. If you see in a film some transformations of people, they suddenly become evil, or bats appear in the form of people, or ghosts, or something else. All this means that this film was made under the influence of spirits. There is such a form of life, a subtle energy body. It really exists because people don't just go crazy for no reason. There are such living beings. When a person ends their life by suicide, they cannot immediately be born in the next life. They have to remain here, in the subtle energy body. They need to live off the life of other people because they cannot exist in just one subtle energy body. They need a refuge. They look for mentally weak people, and these spirits are evil spirits that forcibly invade people's lives. These spirits are the ones that impose on all creative people. Creative people are very sensitive. In ancient culture, people had censorship. Apart from God or moral things, a person had no right to bring into art anything else. That means one could only paint icons or something very sublime and beautiful. No one was allowed to draw any black squares and all sorts of filth. They even executed for this. Now, creative people are very sensitive people. Some of them see and feel the world of angels, while others see the world of demons or spirits. This world of demons, through cinema, art, and culture, has a very strong influence on people's consciousness. Most people watch movies with these spirits, and then it all reflects in their heads. Then they wonder, why is my psyche so heavy? Why is it so hard for me to live? Depression and constant fears appear because we receive such a connection. When a person watches or listens to something attentively with faith, they change their fate. Do you know about this? And they, like an antenna, set themselves up for this wave. This has a huge impact on a person's fate and life. Therefore, in ancient culture, there was very serious censorship on what a person listens to and watches. It was shameful to watch what was not cultural and not good. Even in Soviet times, if someone watched porn, they were put in prison. Now everyone should be imprisoned, because the whole internet is filled with this. Why did I bring up this topic? Because there are 3 layers of life. The first layer of life is called ignorant existence. An ignorant existence or degradation is characterized by people being exposed to alcohol, smoking, and the influence of spirits. They are very susceptible to debauchery, this vulgar culture that is now being imposed by the media. Because it's profitable, it brings money. And when people are in degradation, meaning they basically don't understand that they need to be faithful to their husband or their wife, and that they shouldn't drink heavily, this destroys life. You shouldn't smoke, it also destroys life, because smoking is also connected with spirits, like drinking, except for wine that is blessed on the altar. Wine is a liquid that very strongly connects a person with subtle reality, and if wine is not connected with God, with spiritual reality, then it will definitely be connected with dirty reality. That means if it is not blessed on the altar, then merry spirits enter it, and even blessed wine is diluted with water. There are special rules about this. There's almost no wine left. It's practically like kefir, the same percentage of alcohol. In other words, a person who actively drinks is under the influence of spirits. And the same goes for when a person is immersed in all kinds of horror movies or blockbusters and everything of this sort. It's exactly the same. So what's the idea? If there is the influence of spirits, if people who don't understand what purity, morality, and culture are, then they just have no chance to keep the family together. Even if they love each other, even if they have good, correct feelings for each other. If this energy of degradation influences a person's life, then when even a slightly bad period begins, the family falls apart like a house of cards. Why? Because their stability is very low. because the influence of spirits and these lower forces has a very harsh nature which breaks the person's willpower. For example, if a family lives in this environment, then if a man falls in love, he loses his mind immediately and for a long time. Or if a woman falls in love with someone, the same thing happens. That means there is practically no self-control in this atmosphere. In an atmosphere of degradation, a person cannot be strong-willed and unwavering. They can't control their life. A person is completely unable to control themselves. Their intelligence is asleep. They are in a very weak position. For example, you say, I'm working on myself, listening to lectures, but my husband drinks. What should I do now? How should I live? You should know that this all stems from a previous life. It means if your husband drinks, be sure that in your past life, being in a male body, you drank too. It's just 100% sure. I have examined many people, and I have seen this many times. And you are simply being punished for what happened before. I was born into such a family where almost all of my relatives drank. But I haven't taken a single drop of alcohol in my life, because I told myself I'd rather die than do this. I did it at a young age, and I simply never touched this filth. And it all stopped with me, and my children never touched alcohol. A person can simply stop everything on themselves, but it takes time. For example, a woman says, my husband drinks. You should wait a little. You just need to work on yourself, pray, and be a little patient. And when God forgives you, your husband will have a very strong desire to stop drinking. At first, he will suffer from it. Then he will eventually quit, because your good fate acts as his conscience. If he has no conscience, he drinks without remorse. It means that you are simply being punished. But if you are no longer being punished, he starts to suffer from it. His conscience begins to say, stop drinking. That's it. Your wife's punishment is over. And you also feel relief because he gives hope. That means he already doesn't want to drink anymore. It becomes easier for you to live because of this. But a person cannot immediately stop drinking, even if they no longer want to do it, because they are enslaved by spirits. They keep a person in obedience until a person develops a higher taste for happiness. The spirit, this merry spirit, gives a person happiness in exchange for will. That means a person who drinks gives their will to the spirit and receives happiness from it in return. Such an exchange. If a person feels bad, has a bad mood, then they cannot make themselves happy in this case. They cannot change their mood. They have no opportunity. In this case, their psyche is set on only to drink, and that's it. This means that they believe in this evil spirit. And this belief then enters the culture. And so people think, if there's no alcohol on the table, what kind of celebration is it then? What kind of celebration is it without a bottle? Or, let's say, a wedding. For example, I had a wedding and we didn't drink. And the parents said, what kind of wedding is this without alcohol? What kind of wedding is this? Because they believe in spirits, you understand? And in order for the wedding to be blessed, spirits must be present, because this is their belief, this is culture. And if there are no spirits, then it feels like something is wrong with this wedding. Something is missing, although in the middle of the table, instead of a bottle, there should be an icon. The same goes for the living room. What should a person have in the living room? There should be an altar. And what's there? A one-eyed mentor stands there, a TV. You turn it on, and it starts showing fairy tales. The first thing I did when I started living correctly was to throw out the TV. I don't have a TV at home. And I don't watch video news, I only read it, because when a person is watching, they have a stronger reaction to the situation. I conducted a certain experiment for myself when in 2003 these two twin buildings collapsed in America and nuclear war was predicted. The whole world was on edge for some time. You may have already forgotten. I conducted a specific experiment. I only read this news on paper. And my psyche was absolutely calm and stable, but I kept all these news records. And when everything calmed down, I took the recordings and watched how the anchors told all this news. And I entered this state of chaos and terrible panic. It had an impact on my psyche. I started to worry about the possibility of nuclear war and so on. You see, I was affected as a result of this general impact. If all people set themselves up for a certain wave, it changes fate. I caught this wave that was there during that period. Well, back then, I just realized how terrible this force is. It simply prevailed over me, so I lost my mind, although I constantly keep myself in check and pray. Imagine what power this influence has, especially when there's a wave of some strong information and you watch video news. These emotions of the anchor have an impact on you. You go crazy from all of this. Or in 2010, a woman at a lecture raises her hand and says, Dr. Torsunov, in 2012 there will definitely be the end of the world. I say, well, even if it happens, there's no point in talking about it. She says, but we need to prepare. I say, and how will you prepare? She says, we need to understand where it will be. I say, if it's the end of the world, it means it will be everywhere. She says, no, Dr. Torsunov, you're wrong. I say, well, let's think about it. Look, I'm not preparing and just living happily until 2012. 2 whole years left. And you won't live for these 2 years. You'll be in panic, in shock, in depression, constantly thinking about it. You won't even be able to sleep. So you're losing 2 years of your life, while I will still be living for 2 more years. She says, that's actually right. I agree. We can still live for 2 years. I laughed so much. I actually had an end of the world in 2012. On that very day when the end of the world was supposed to happen, they turned off the electricity for 2 hours in a nearby village. And then there was the beginning of light. I laughed so much, the prediction came true. Look, I'm going to tell you something now. When a person's death comes, it always comes from behind, and a person never feels it. But when chaos comes, and it's not death that comes, but just disinformation, then it always comes from the front and constantly influences your mind. When the war began in 1941, on that day everyone was happy and no one suspected anything at all. It was like a bolt from the blue. And when everyone has been shouting for 3 years that the end of the world will come, it definitely means that nothing will happen. 100% that's how it is. When trouble comes, it sneaks up on a person very imperceptibly. The person doesn't even suspect it at all. Let's say a close person is supposed to leave you. You won't know about it. Everything will seem fine, then all of a sudden they're gone. This is how trouble always acts. It never acts directly. It doesn't show itself to you. If everyone is constantly shouting that the end of the world is coming, you can be sure that it's just nonsense. I'm telling you some things that may not be on the topic of family relationships, but today our topic is overcoming the difficulties of fate. I want to tell you that in this topic, the most important thing is what you listen to and what you watch. If a person watches and listens to something with faith, they change their fate. You need to surround yourself with good information, good news, and something positive. What difference does it make to you whether people are starving in Nicaragua or not? Why do you need to think about it? Or if someone raped someone in Peru, don't you have enough of your own problems? Do you need to think about this too? When a person thinks about something, they give their devoutness to it. Is everything fine in your life? Have you fixed everything in your life to think about who's starving in Peru or Nicaragua? What's the difference? Fix your own life. Direct your thoughts. Whatever a person thinks about, that is where one gives their energy. Direct your energy to simply fixing your own life. Stop watching movies that destroy a person's psyche. There are so many movies now about how holy people lived. Just a huge amount of these films, amazingly moral films. So many good things are being made in the cinema now. In general, hundreds of thousands of films are released every year, and there are also many good ones. There are entire series. There's one Muslim series called Farooq Omar. It has 30 episodes of 40 minutes each. It's about how Prophet Muhammad came and how the first Muslims appeared. I watched it. It's just great. Religious people are playing there. It's so cool. I fully understood what Muslim culture is. Everything just fell into place in my head. Similarly, there are lots of such films about Jesus Christ. You should choose those that religious people like, not modern films where they make something up. In other words, study all this. Television can help a person be happy, and songs can help as well. You hear many good songs during my lectures, but everywhere else, many bad ones are played now. I choose songs for you. One song says how to learn to live in this world, to be able to love, to be able to forgive. Isn't it great? This is what you should listen to. I was recently sent this song. It's great, isn't it? All this brings happiness. Why listen to any nonsense? Let's figure it out. If you have such a situation in life, your husband drinks or your wife cheats on you, you feel that you can't do anything about it, you shouldn't leave your close person. There's only happiness ahead of you. This is 100% sure. You need to understand how to achieve this happiness. The first thing you should do is try to expect less from your close person. Start doing more spiritual practice. Work on yourself. Give yourself more time to communicate with friends, men with men, women with women. Try to find support from your parents. Find yourself a mentor. Fix your life first. Know that light defeats darkness always and everywhere. If a person starts to shine, starts to develop as a personality, the close person who personifies their fate will definitely change. They will change much slower than you think, but steadily, and will always go in the direction of better and better and better and better. It will seem to you that it's too slow, but it will still be victorious. And 100% at some point they will completely abandon the bad life and start living a good life. You will be very surprised that this can happen because it seems impossible. Raise your hand who has experienced this with a close person. They quit drinking and so on. The lady in blue, how long did it take for your husband to come to the lecture? It took 5 years. She has already come to the lecture with her husband. This is how a person overcomes their fate. This applies to all people always. I know when a man saves a woman from debauchery. The wife cheats, he endures, works on himself, and suddenly she becomes a normal person. It's always better to live like this. If you leave, the same will happen again. It's endless. God doesn't like when we try to escape punishment in our fate. We leave the corner we put ourselves in and look for a happy life. You shouldn't leave anyone, but you also shouldn't suffer. If the husband beats, if he abuses, you shouldn't live with him. You need to live apart, but you shouldn't leave him. You need to understand that the situation is restored in this way. First, pray and try to forget this situation. Think about God. At some point, you will feel in your heart that everything will be fine in your relationship with your husband. Raise your hand. Who has already felt it? Who feels that everything will be fine, although nothing is fine? You can't even communicate with him normally, but you feel that everything will be fine. This is the first stage of overcoming fate. The second stage is as follows. Let's say you live apart. Communication begins and the husband starts saying, I want to change. Please come back, I want to change. You tell him, I can come back, but these are the conditions. You haven't changed yet. It's okay. I'll tolerate this. But you can't fight, you can't be insolent, and you can't behave rudely. This is the main thing. I'm coming back, but as soon as you start being rude, I'll leave again. This is how we'll live with you. You shouldn't hate him. The second stage means that you can influence the person. You communicate with him, and he's reasonable. He agrees with all this, but can't change yet. Raise your hand, who is at the second stage. You see, there are such people too. Now the third stage. The husband continues to drink. You work on yourself, but he already doesn't want to drink at all. He's already trying to overcome himself, but it's still difficult for him. He continues to drink, but you feel joy in your heart because he wants to change his life. Raise your hand if you've already reached this point. Are there any such women? One person. This is the third stage of overcoming one's fate. Next, the husband simply stops drinking. A lot of people will reach this point. The third stage doesn't last too long. The first stage, when you pray, work on yourself, and nothing changes, lasts the longest. And suddenly, unexpectedly, a feeling appears in your heart that everything will be fine. The first stage is the longest, the second is shorter, the third is even shorter. The hardest part is to start doing this, to understand in principle that it's possibly the hardest thing in the world for me to improve my personal situation in life. The hardest part is to enter a dirty kitchen to start washing dishes. It's very difficult to wash the first plate, but when you've washed the first plate, you don't even notice how you washed the second one. Then you don't notice at all how you've washed everything. I find it so funny. I have various stories about overcoming fate, but I don't want to brag. I want to tell you a funny story about how my students helped me collect thorns in the garden. In the back of the garden, there are trees growing to prevent intruders from entering the garden. They have long thorns. The previous owner planted them before me. They've overgrown and the branches need to be cut. My helpers came and cut the branches. They were too lazy to carry them far away, so they piled these branches under my pear tree, and it became impossible to pull them out of there because they were very prickly. The thorns were like daggers and they intertwined with each other. I asked them, take these away. They said, we can't. They couldn't lift them because there were many of them, and they couldn't take them apart because they were all intertwined. I couldn't do anything about it either, so these branches stayed there for a year. I decided to conduct an experiment. I decided to overcome this fate with the help of prayer. It's a joke, of course, to spend energy on this. I decided to see how fate works. I sat in front of the altar, played the voice of my mentor, and began to pray. After 2 minutes, calmness appeared in my heart, the first stage of overcoming fate. After another 5 minutes, I had knowledge of what to do. The knowledge was this: go and make a fire next to this pile. It couldn't be burned because the beautiful pear tree would burn. Such large pears grow there. It would be a pity if it burned. I think, make a fire. I'll go make a fire. In the second stage, a person receives knowledge of what to do. Although they don't understand how it will help, they clearly feel what they must do. I went and made a fire. I prayed some more and reached the third stage, that everything will be fine. I felt victory over fate and went outside. It took another 3 minutes. I made a fire. I liked this fire so much. It was burning. I looked at it. Lord, how good it is by the fire. The fire started to end. I began to run around the yard. There wasn't a single stick to keep the fire burning. I looked at this pile thinking, I want to keep the fire burning. Maybe I can pull out some branches. I started walking around this pile and noticed a branch that I could take. The branches there were long, about 1.5 meters. I noticed that it could be pulled out. I pulled it out without gloves and put it in the fire. It burned for a while longer, and I thought, it's burning. I need to add 2 more. In short, in 20 minutes, the pile was gone. What's the idea? On the subtle energy level, a person suffers the most in life. They feel the most problems because it seems to them that the situation is completely insurmountable. When they pray, they should remember God or remember who is praying. In the early stages, a person should pray like this. They first calm down in their heart, and then they gain the strength to overcome fate. One of the first such experiments I conducted when I was at the Institute. They tried to kick me out of the Institute twice for not going to the lectures. At that time, I was visiting patients and treating them. I went into the clinic and looked for whoever was feeling bad and helped them. I didn't go to lectures because I felt that I wouldn't practice this kind of medicine. It seemed to me that I would practice a different kind of medicine, one that's associated with a healthy lifestyle, and that's how it turned out. One time it got to the point where a meeting was called to expel me. They were supposed to vote who was for and who was against. I went there because there was supposed to be a vote. At this time I was praying and felt the first stage. I felt peace in my heart. Then the second stage, the stage of influence, and I thought, I need to see what happens next. I went there. I was an experimenter studying everything, not afraid of anything. People were already gathering there. The dean and those who influenced the situation began to gather there. Everyone who passed by me first looked at me. I had one acquaintance there. This acquaintance said, everyone who came later voted for. Everyone who came earlier voted against. All the people who passed by me then voted for me, and I remained at the Institute. The second time they were trying to expel me. I didn't even know that they were preparing documents against me again. This was already around the 5th year. I continued to hardly attend lectures and spent all my time with patients. By this time I already had my own group. Even some teachers were part of it. I was teaching them alternative medicine, various techniques of acupressure and so on. At this time, the vice-rector's son fell from the 5th floor. His son was an adult athlete and was completely broken but remained alive. The vice-rector was actually an expert surgeon, a traumatologist. He had many dissertations. He put him back together, simply stitched up his child, restored him completely. But there was a bone that was made from sawdust of his own bone. He made this bone, formed it, because it was already irreparable. It wasn't healing and he didn't know what to do. He had no options of his own, so he turned to alternative medicine. They recommended me as a specialist. I came to his house every day, started treating through acupressure points, massaging and working with him. The bone began to heal, and he was just endlessly happy. He was the vice-rector for academic affairs at the Institute. At this time, my dean had already gathered documents against me and put them on his desk. He put the folder aside and invited the dean to his home at the moment when I was working with his son. When the dean came, he said, "So, this is what you do during lectures?" The vice-rector said, "Yes, this is my attending physician, Dr. Torsunov." After that, no one bothered me anymore. I finished my studies. This doesn't mean that you all need to study like this. What's my point? If a person fulfills their duty in life and prays, they will not be defeated. It's impossible to break them, impossible to defeat such a person. If a person does what God wants from them, even if someone thinks they are doing something wrong, God wanted me to help people. I did it, and I don't regret it. What's the idea? When a person is in such a life situation, when a loved one drinks or quarrels or fights or cheats, God wants you to preserve the family. Do this, and God will help you. Don't allow yourself to be humiliated. If you feel it's unbearable to live with this person, live separately. No one is forcing you to suffer. It's an illusion to think that I must endure all this necessarily. If you feel that your loved one is unbearable, fine, live separately, but never abandon them. Pray to restore the family. Set conditions for them when you decide to reunite. Always, when you leave and live at a distance, you should keep good feelings. You may even live in the same apartment but expect nothing from the person. You simply fulfill your duties towards them but expect nothing, and don't build a close relationship with them. From this moment, when the person sees that you behave this way, they develop a strong gratitude in their heart. No matter what kind of person they are, gratitude will grow. Gradually, this will lead them to change. This is 100% sure. I've seen thousands of examples. Then your family will come out of this tailspin of a life of degradation, immoral behavior and lack of conscience in relationships. This is a life in degradation. In this life, there is no family life. In fact, there is only suffering there. This is nevertheless inevitable if God wants it so. I saw all this in my childhood. I just endured. Then I decided that I didn't need to look at this anymore. I started working on myself, developing, and understood how fate is overcome. There are 3 stages of trials. They are described in fairy tales. The first stage is called fire. A family life in degradation is called fire. A person burns, their psyche burns. They can't live like this. They feel bad and howl at the moon. Their psyche is burning. They can't stand it. The second stage is called water. At the second stage, people tell me, "Dr. Torsunov, I've been listening to the lectures for 4 years. Everything is good for us, but This is the second stage. People become very busy. They have many desires in relation to this life. They want a bigger apartment, a bigger car, more children. They develop a strong desire to expand their fate, to have everything bigger and better. Higher and higher and higher we strive in the flight of our birds. At the second stage, a person should understand well that this is also a test for the family, not for them personally, but a test for the family. At the second stage, the family can also fall apart like a house of cards, but for a different reason. The reason is that at the second stage, people start to overwork themselves. They lose the ability to communicate closely with each other because they are very busy. People find things to do. A mother might take her children to many extracurricular activities. A man works 3 jobs. They seem to help everyone, but there's no healthy life, no rest, none of that, no relationships either. They just live together and constantly work. There are several destructive stages of family existence. This is called life in passion. People bustle about, can't stop. This is life in passion. There are several destructive stages. The first stage is called dream. Believe in the dream, believe in the dream. People think our life is actually a beautiful house in the countryside or a 3-room apartment. Everyone has a dream according to their possibilities. This is our life. Here, our happiness is found. Or 5 children. That's happiness. Everyone dreams in their own direction. There's a dream of expanding desires, satisfying desires in life. All this creates tension. As a result, at the second stage, there is tension. The first stage is a dream. The second stage is overworking. The third stage is fatigue. The fourth is breakdown. And the fifth stage is either the correct way of life, transition to pure goodness, or devastation. The fifth stage is already an exam. Either you change your life or the family falls apart. There's only one reason why it falls apart. Yesterday, a woman approached me and said, "Dr. Torsunov, everything seemed to be fine from my side, but my man left. Or rather, he didn't leave. He seems to be planning to live with me, but he wants to have a relationship with another woman." I explained to her, "Look, the man is exhausted. He's overworked and now he needs an outlet in life. In order to continue living in the family, he needs some force that will give him the opportunity to recover. You won't be able to restore him because he's used to you. That's why he needs a mistress. He seems to be a conscientious person. He says, I can't leave the family, but I also can't live without her. I'll simply break down. I'm tired of life." He's being quite honest about it. She doesn't know what to do with this. This is a good option. There was still a lot of conscience in the person that he decided to stay in the family. Usually it's like this. Don't wait for me for dinner. Goodbye. People just leave and that's it. They slam the door and it's over. Why? Because they have no way out. A woman leaves because she doesn't feel any happiness in life with this person. He comes from work without even saying hello to her. He sits down, watches TV. Why is he watching TV? He's just trying to survive. He's just trying to somehow come to his senses. He got drunk after work. People usually go to bed very late because they can't relax, can't relieve tension and fall asleep immediately. They need to overeat, watch something on TV or drink, which is even worse. They go to bed drunk because there's no other way out. This downward spiral indicates a life of degradation. Then fights and everything else begin. At the second stage of family development, relationship development, when people are in passion, they can't be happy because they place their happiness in the future. They believe that someday in the future they will have happiness. The most surprising thing is that if these families still achieve their goals, get rid of the mortgage, live in a good house, no longer need to pay off anything, it relaxes them at this moment. And at this moment, they actually separate and divide this house. They are so disappointed in their life together that it took so many years for this nonsense. They traded their life for some house. Moreover, their children grow up as strangers. Parents don't engage with them, and then children don't engage with their parents. People become strangers to each other because their whole life is devoted to work. Let's take a person's circle of happiness. We'll draw a circle. Let's take home and work. This is one sector. I want to have comfort in life. This is another sector. I want to have happiness from relationships with children, with my wife. I want to be healthy. I want to go on vacation. I want to engage in spiritual practice. I want to work on myself. I want to have friends. These are all sectors of happiness that require time. If a person decides that the most important things in their life are home and work, will there be time for the wife? No. For friends? No. For vacation? No. Will there be time to eat properly? No. Will there be time for health? No. Will there be time for spiritual life? No. What's left for a person? Only work. And is this normal? Will this life go on? People simply go crazy from such a life. They rush around so much during the day and then come home and meet their spouse. People can no longer stand each other. They don't get happiness from each other. They invest all their energy into work. They don't invest in each other at all. They don't care for each other. Because the problem is not that you run off to work, but that you have such a level of consciousness. When a person drinks, cheats, this is their level of personal development. This is how they perceive the world. Depending on how a person perceives the world, that's how they relax and rest. Why does a person drink? They have no way out. They don't know how to survive in this world. Similarly, when a close person works, you suffer because they work. You also work and suffer because you lack relationships. This is your perception of the world. You think this is happiness. You've put the apartment, which you need to pay for, as the top priority in your life. Even if you're not saving for a mortgage, but just working to survive, and you have to do a lot of work, it's still this level. It means that people are not developed. Spiritual development gives a person liberation in all respects, from working themselves to the bones. The first thing that liberates, decreasing material needs. The second thing that liberates, a person's circle of friends and relationships change during development. Their activities and work also change. Everything in their life changes and becomes easier. They become developed as a person. It's very difficult for you to understand this now. If you understood it, you would live accordingly.
We do live like this, and in principle we're okay with it, but...
How long have you been living together?
We don't live together. We lived together for a certain time, then we had problems. Now we just work together and are building a relationship.
Building a relationship, to put it mildly. Okay, don't change anything, just develop as a person. Because there is also a third stage, it's called pure goodness. In pure goodness, there are different problems. In pure goodness, the most important thing is not to become proud of yourself, not to become a detached sectarian, not to become wild in this society, thinking that everyone else lives badly and only you live correctly. In pure goodness, the main thing is to remain a social person, to remain kind to everyone, but at the same time not to become proud of your knowledge. Life becomes much easier for a person. Different communication, different association, kind people around who constantly take care of you. There's faith in God all around. A person in pure goodness acquires faith, and they are surrounded by people of faith. People in passion consider them a sectarian, and people in degradation consider them crazy. They consider people in passion underdeveloped, and people in degradation degraded. People in passion consider those in pure goodness to be obsessed, and those in degradation to be degraded. People in degradation consider those in pure goodness to be crazy, and those in passion to be obsessed because they work too hard. Money should be earned easily. Easily means just robbing a bank. My mother didn't give birth to me for hard work. It's a proverb in degradation. Happiness is not in money, but in its quantity. A proverb in passion, and a proverb in pure goodness. Happiness is not in money. The idea is that when a person reaches pure goodness, they really begin to understand how to keep a family together, how to live together, how to be happy. For this, one just has to develop as a person. One needs to invest in their close person, learn to be patient with them, learn to forgive, learn to understand that they are also a human, not just an object of my desires. They have their own character, they need help. This is not easy to understand. One should really develop as a person. While a person is on the level of degradation, their self-esteem is in great need. A person in degradation is constantly struggling for themselves, for their own views, and doesn't want to listen to anyone. They are in great need. Their self-esteem needs protection. They are constantly asserting themselves in life, proving everything to everyone, being at odds with everyone. They think the country they live in is bad, the people are bad. It's even worse there, those people are really bad, our people are bad, everyone is bad. They are constantly angry at everyone, constantly whining and swearing at everyone. A person in passion thinks, everything is fine. We live as we live. The main thing is to pay off debts. They no longer feel that everyone is very bad, but not very good either. They still live in their own shell. A person in pure goodness begins to see nature, begins to see the world, and begins to feel purity in everything around. They begin to feel the depth of this world. They begin to understand that even the earth is a living being, that it's alive, that you should love it. In pure goodness, the perception of the world changes so much you just can't imagine. Have you ever thought about your earth this way? You can find a song on the internet called My Earth. A person should live like this. They should relate to this world differently. They should learn to see purity and depth in everything because it's there. And when a person sets themselves up like this, very deeply, purely, and brightly, they begin to perceive their loved one in the same way. They start to see the best and good things in them. They begin to see people differently and understand everything. and then the family can definitely stay together. You should evaluate yourself at which of these stages you are. Look at where you are. If you are living a life of degradation, don't expect anything from your life right now. Don't think about when they will change. Don't think about it. Change yourself, learn to pray, learn to live correctly, and watch them. You will see how they change, and the condition is this: don't bother this person. When they are in degradation, the most important thing is not to bother them. Just change yourself, and they will gradually change too. When a person begins to live in passion, when we work ourselves to the bone and so on, we need to help the person come out of this state. Try to help them relax, relieve tension, organize life, watch moral films when you rest. Also, it's possible to go to a festival during this period and relieve tension, relax completely for 2 weeks there, and get into this atmosphere of pure goodness. To taste this purity, everything there will be woven to make you live happily and simply enjoy this happy life. That means just develop yourself when you are in passion. Don't be afraid of anything. This development itself will provide protection from cheating and everything else. Because even if a person feels a little bit that life is becoming easier, they keep believing in the best and won't leave. A person leaves when they feel that everything is hopeless. Even if a person has left you and they maintain a relationship with you, communicate, and they don't have anyone else, then in fact the family is still preserved. If you start praying now and working on yourself, most likely they will return. Because if someone else has already appeared, then there's nothing you can do. I know people who live separately for several years. They communicate, support the family, but can't live together because they live incorrectly. They have run out of this energy of grace that can unite them. This thread that connects them simply begins to stink. There's no happiness in it. And always when people just live to satisfy their desires, this thread between them fades each day. Only when a person lives correctly, when they work on themselves, they can revive their heart in relationships. Relationships between a man and a woman are so selfish by nature and so focused on satisfying their own desires that they constantly fade and constantly stink. That means they are constantly befouled by this selfishness, and we are surprised. We scold our loved one. We say, "You're such a pig. You're always thinking about yourself." In fact, we are exactly the same, because family life itself is woven this way. It is woven from a strong desire for happiness in relation to a loved one, and therefore it is woven from suffering. Because the one who can be happy is not the one who desires happiness from a loved one, but the one who has forgotten about their own desire and gives happiness to a loved one and doesn't think about how to be happy themselves. You really need to change yourself completely, because a woman doesn't understand that she's waiting for happiness. She thinks, well, I'm not waiting for happiness, I just want to live. To live for her, it means that her husband should be gentle, smile to her, because if she lived next to a woman, she would behave that way. She tells him, "Can't you behave like that?" He can't, because he's a man. And a man constantly expects affection, attention, and care from a woman. For her, this is also difficult. It's work, and so on. That means people are convinced that this is what they should have in their family life, but it's simply an asceticism practice. A person should develop until they have strength in their heart, the strength to start caring for other people, to start living with other interests, to enjoy life, to think about other people, to care for everyone. And for this, there is a completely different culture, different songs, different films, which your heart will be drawn to. You will want to watch this, you will want to see this, you will want to hear this. You will be drawn to the scriptures, descriptions of the lives of holy people. You will study all this, it will become your life, but you will have one problem. The problem will be that when a person moves from one level to another, they are not let go. For example, if a person leaves the criminal world, they are told, "If you leave, we'll kill you." Right? You're laughing. I'm telling you the truth. Or, let's say, a man quits drinking and his buddies tell him, "Are you leaving us, you bastard?" That means they force him to return to this drunken company. Force him in the literal sense of the word. That means there will be trials. If a person moves from the passionate level to the level of pure goodness, they are told, "Have you joined a sect?" Even if a person doesn't change their faith, they remain in their faith, and immediately everyone's eyes go wide. What are you doing? Well, okay. Going to the temple? Well, go there once a week. Why did you start fasting? Are you crazy or something? Are you a monk or what? Live a normal life? Why do you need to pray for 2 hours a day? And so on. That means everyone is afraid. What if you then go to a monastery? What to do with you then? And so on. People are afraid. Any transition from one level to another always causes fear in everyone, and this will be your test. But this is a hopeless situation. There's nothing you can do, because life in passion leads to overstrain and destruction of a person. This life doesn't give any guarantees. A person must understand that there should be balance in everything. They should work as much as their heart desires. They should take care of their health every day, should pray, take care of family. All of this should be in balance, and this all is a happy life, which is called living in the present time. Not that I will have a good life tomorrow when I have an apartment, a car, and so on, but life should be happy right now. This means that you don't need to work yourself to the bone. You should give happiness to your wife, your children now. You should pray now to understand who God is, because this is the main goal of human life, and so on. If you have felt this strength, then the family will begin to preserve itself, because it will be nourished with this pure and bright energy that will live in you, and your husband will feel easier. And even the cockroaches will feel easier. They will become full of pure goodness. They will crawl out at night, and during the day they will sit humbly where they are supposed to. And even mice will behave this way if you have some kind of village house. I'm telling you for sure. Everything becomes good for a person who lives correctly, and even the nature around such a person reacts differently to them. If your life is unbearable, if you don't know what to do, if your relationships with children or parents or your loved one are destroyed, if you have nowhere to work, if you have no way out in life, don't go to psychologists or astrologers. Go and pray. Know that a person can overcome their fate only from within, because it is created from within. Fate is in the heart. Play the voice of a holy person in your faith, in your tradition. Pray in your faith, in your tradition. Start listening to it. Distract yourself from yourself during prayer. The first thing that happens to a person when overcoming fate is that they stop thinking about their grief. They start thinking about prayer and begin to pray. So the first thing that happens is that the person's memory switches to purity, to prayer, and they forgets about themselves. Now, who during the lecture had their memory distracted from themselves, and you started listening to songs, listening to the lecture, and forgot yourself, as if you were immersed in all of this? Raise your hand. You are now overcoming your fate. Because the moment when a person forgets themselves in this spiritual practice, they are really burning their bad fate. It's a great fortune to have such a mood, such an attitude. A person should always seek and wait for it in life. And every day of my life, I always find at least an hour and a half to 2 hours to forget about myself and my life. I listen to how the mentor prays, and I pray with him and immerse myself in this purity. Otherwise, it's impossible to live normally. A person must overcome their fate every day. And the first stage of overcoming fate is like this. It seemed to you that it was unbearable. You would never cope with your life situation. You can't live with it anymore. Something needs to be done. And suddenly you start to feel in your heart that everything will be fine. Raise your hand who just attended lectures and you already had a feeling in your heart that everything would be fine. You see, it was enough for you to just listen. You didn't even need to pray to go through this first stage. So your life situation is not so difficult, because there are people who, despite coming to the lecture, don't feel in their hearts that everything will be fine. Raise your hand if this is the case for you. This means a more difficult situation in life, but it's also 100% defeatable. You just need to continue, because it's always the same for everyone, you understand? Nothing happens differently. I've seen 1,000 times how people overcome their fate. I've seen 1,000 times how people save themselves from the most hopeless situation. Once a week we conduct such sessions. We simply gather together, play the voice of a holy person loudly, and everyone repeats the prayer loudly. We do it for 2 hours. Once we gathered like this and started repeating the prayer, one woman needed to leave. She just started praying and left in this mood of prayer. When she went about her business, at that time she was supposed to die, because that's how her fate was acting, and at this time, when she was crossing the road, one car crashed into another. This car that crashed flipped over. She was walking with a child, and this car fell right on her and the child, and it flipped over with them again. The speed was very high. Those who saw this thought that she and the child were crushed flat. She described her state. She felt as if she had fallen into God's palm at that moment, as if the Lord had protected her. She had a small bruise on her head, no fractures, nothing. The child had nothing at all, just one scratch, that's all. Everyone who saw it thought they were completely crushed. But nothing happened. She says, "We ended up in some places where we weren't touched. This happened just half a year ago." I've told you the most recent case, but there are many such cases. For all people who live correctly, this happens all the time in life. Because a person who lives correctly becomes invincible. Evil cannot touch them. And even if it does touch them, they still overcome this bad fate of theirs. You just need to understand that this is how it works. When a person agrees that their fate will defeat them, it will defeat them. And agreeing means not listening, not living in sound, not praying. I had to pray for 8 hours a day for several years of my life to overcome fate, to reach the first stage, calmness in the heart. That's how fate acted. At 24, I already knew that at 48, I would have an event that could break my life. I won't go into details. I already knew this 24 years before it happened. And then, when it started, I remembered what I knew. I went to a holy place and prayed for 8 hours a day, every day. And after more than 20 days, I felt victory. I went back and then everything happened like in a fairy tale. These evil forces didn't touch me, they couldn't do anything to me, and they wanted to do a lot. And they did it at the highest level possible. Nothing worked at all, absolutely nothing. Why? Because everything in this world happens according to God's will. If God wants, there will be problems. If He doesn't want, there won't be problems. When I was studying this topic of overcoming fate, I was still very young. I've been doing this for a long time. When I started, I studied how prayer works. I was always trying to understand how fate works and learn to look into the future. I had such a case. I was lying in the bathtub, steaming and praying at the same time. I was about 22 years old. I was looking, is everything okay in the near future? And I discovered that soon, in a few months, I would lose the lower part of my right leg. They would cut off my right leg, and I would be on one leg. I thought, I need to fight this. Why should I walk on one leg? I was just studying whether fate can be overcome or not, because many people say that what is destined will happen. But I just think this is complete nonsense. Such thinking is complete nonsense. And I thought then that it was nonsense. Otherwise, why live on this earth? And I just started my prayer. I started my prayer and gradually felt everything would be fine, but the event would happen. And I didn't want to pray further for the event not to happen. It was important for me to feel, to understand that what I think is true. And I stopped. I felt that the event would happen, but nothing would happen to me. I was interested to see what would happen next. I was studying my life. Imagine how fate acts out of nowhere. I was going to dig for herbs. I treated people with herbs. I dug them up, dried them, and then treated people with these herbs. I was going to the forest to dig for herbs. I was young, a beginner doctor. I had patience, work, and I was trying to help people. I had a shovel in one hand and a plastic bag with a knife, a very sharp knife. I had already dug up some herbs. I was walking, and at some point the shovel bent down. There were thickets of grass and a hummock. I didn't see it because of the grass. The shovel stuck into the hummock. The knife ended up between the shovel and the hummock. And I love to walk very fast. And the knife rested against the shovel, and I thrust my leg into this knife with all my might. And the knife stuck into my leg. It was already infected because I was digging in the earth, and it immediately knocked me to the ground. I had such a pain shock that I was just lying down and the knife was sticking out. Oh, right leg, just the spot. And then the next thought came, well, you prayed, there should be some way out. And I was about 4 or 5 kilometers away from the edge of the forest. And the Lord tells me in my heart, well, get up, lean on the shovel, get up, there is a way out. You prayed, now get up. And I get up and start looking around, and I see as there are some people in the distance. As if a man and a woman are standing, then rising, like a mirage. I focused in that direction, shouting, help! Help, I need help. And they saw me. I was leaning on a shovel standing there, and they started running. Then I saw people running from somewhere. I already saw people, they came running. It turned out they had a car nearby. And they brought a first aid kit from this car. There was iodine in the first aid kit, and I said, pull out the knife. They said, are you sure? I said, yes, I'm sure. They pulled it out, and blood gushed out. And I said, pour iodine into the wound. They said, pour iodine into the wound? That's scary. I said, pour it. And they started pouring iodine into the wound. At first it stopped the blood, then this iodine flowed inside the wound. I was groaning, and then there was just a scar left on the leg. Everything healed. They took me home by car right away. And that's how this situation ended. That means that God showed me that everything is true. It could have been gangrene and leg amputation. It could have happened, but it didn't. Why? Because there was a prayer. And many, many such events will happen in your life in exactly the same way. Just start this practice because everything depends on your memory, especially if you concentrate in your memory on a holy person, or just on those who pray. If people pray sincerely and you just start to remember them and how they chant the prayer, their mood, then at some point you will be distracted from your fate. And at the moment when you detach from your fate, you will begin to burn it. This is 100% sure. Moreover, if you have a loved one in trouble and you want to help them, you should also pray. Listen to those who pray. Look at your altar. Mentally bow to the altar. It's better not to move during prayers. And try to repeat in such a mood as someone prays. That means you should copy their mood, but don't copy the same rhythm. Pray at your own rhythm, but try to feel their mood. And at the moment when you forget about this person you want to help, at this moment God will begin to help them. And when you finish the prayer, you will remember how you felt. You will remember this person, and you will feel that their problem seems smaller than it was before. But when you call them and ask, they will say, everything is the same as it was. Why? Because you are at the first stage. The first stage means that the situation in your heart is now changing in relation to the person. And at some point you will feel lightness and calmness in your heart. Everything will be fine. This means that you have passed the first stage of victory. Then you continue praying, and it seems as if you're starting all over again, as if you were at the beginning. There was a lightness before, then suddenly you start to feel this person. But again, you should distract yourself from the person, and again think about God, and listen to those who pray with them, engage yourself in this powerful memory of spiritual life. And when you've done all this, engaged in this practice, two things will come to you at the second stage. First thing, if this person doesn't listen to you, and you know what's right, they will start to listen. And if it's a boss who's firing you from work, you'll start to have good contact with them at the second stage. Although they will still want to fire you, they will change their attitude towards you. That means that you can communicate with them. And at the second stage comes the knowledge of what to do. A person really understands why the boss wants to fire them, how to treat this person, how to get the husband back, and they already start communicating with the husband. It was unbearable even to think about him, to remember, let alone talk to him, because the resentment was so strong. And at the second stage, the woman talks to him as if nothing happened. And she reestablishes a relationship with him. She establishes a friendly relationship at first, and then when the second stage ends, an amazing thing happens. A person feels not just that everything will be fine, but they feel that they are influencing the situation, really influencing the situation. Imagine, for example, your child is drowning. You're here and the child is there, but you're influencing the situation. I had such a case. We were going with my friend to a holy place. It was a dark night. It was dangerous there. There were two warring groups, so to speak. People were very fanatically minded. And we came to this place, to this holy place. We were walking. It was in Russia, by the way, a long time ago, about 25 years ago, or 24. It was a dangerous time, and I saw two people in black coats were walking in front of us on the path, forest, no one around, and they were walking slowly on the sides of the path. We were overtaking them, and at that moment I felt a club was about to hit my head from behind. That means I didn't see the club, but I felt it, because I had developed this ability in myself. And I suddenly quickly lowered my head like this, and the club touched my head. It didn't hit my head, but just touched it. And since my friend didn't feel anything, they hit him on the legs. They hit his leg hard, and I said, "Run," and we ran. They ran after us, these people. Since my friend was already a little wounded, he couldn't run fast, and he stopped at some point. Or rather, they caught him. They caught up with him and grabbed him. And I had a choice, either to run to them and get hit on the head with a club again, or do something else. And I froze at some point and realized what to do. That means that I immediately started thinking about God and reached this second stage, knowledge of what to do. I gathered myself very strongly, gathered all my inner strength, and such a sound came out of me, such a voice. I said, "One more move, and I curse you." That's what I said. Well, I told them that I would curse them to death. That means that I really made an immense effort, and I said it like this, and didn't even open my eyes. When I opened my eyes, they were frozen with clubs. They were paralyzed and couldn't move, and then they got scared and just ran away. And that's it. And they didn't do anything to him. I just defeated this situation with sound. I just concentrated so strongly on God that they couldn't even kill. Can you imagine? That means that there is a way out in any situation. You just need to gather yourself internally and remember God very strongly. That means that the Lord protects everyone and always. I have an acquaintance who was distributing spiritual literature. Some bandits just took his bags and ran away, and he started shouting, crying out a prayer. As a result, the police immediately came, tied up these people, gave him back his bags, and took these bandits away. Such a case happened. Well, there are many different cases. What is the most important? Let's think. Let's say you are a very sick person, a very sick person. There are 3 types of aging. This is not on the topic of family relationships. Should I tell you about this? This is the main thing in life. There are 3 types of aging. The first type of aging is when a person gains weight or toxins increase in their body. At the second stage, this turns into a benign tumor, and at the third stage, into a malignant one. This type of aging is overcome with the help of prayer and prolonged, continuous movement in nature. Continuous, calm, prolonged movement in nature. Running is the best. If you can't run, then walk fast, but calmly. Don't fuss, but just walk quickly and calmly. When a person walks for more than 50 minutes and runs for more than 25 minutes, they begin to overcome fate. I experience a real full cleansing of the body after an hour and a half of running, somewhere from 12 to 14 kilometers. You will experience approximately the same, but even if you walk for an hour or run for 30 minutes, you will notice tremendous changes in how you feel. This is because excess weight or benign tumors begin to lose strength. However, to overcome this, you need to combine running with fasting. It's not necessary to fast on the same day you run. You should fast one day, at least until lunch, and on another day go for a long walk or go for a run. Excess weight and benign tumors lose strength as a result of this practice. This is 100% sure. However, if you have a malignant tumor, it must be surgically removed or treated in some other way by doctors. All of this extends your ability to live. There's a battle going on with the tumor, and it needs to be defeated. A benign tumor doesn't fight with a person, but a malignant one does, because an evil spirit enters the malignant one, and it fights, it wants to kill the person. It's a living entity inside you, and it needs to be destroyed, preferably surgically. The second type of aging is when a person has strong tension. There are two types of tension. One type of tension constrains you, while the other deprives you of functions. For example, if you can't bend or straighten up, that's the tension that constrains you. And the second type of tension is headaches, spasms, difficulty breathing, poor functioning of the digestive system, nothing digests properly, constipation, diarrhea, joint pain. This is a type of aging. What is aging? It's when the older you get, the more it affects you. How to overcome the second type of aging, which is called tension? A person should learn to remain in a stationary position of the body. This can be standing straight without moving or sitting, bending forward or backward. But if you bend forward for a long time, then you need to bend backward for a long time afterward. And if you stand, then nothing else is needed. In any case, standing still is the easiest. When a person stands still for more than 25 minutes, they begin to overcome their fate. I think that each exercise is necessary. Stand still, then change pose, bringing it up to 40, 50 minutes, and afterwards the victory over fate definitely begins. And the second thing a person should do is prolonged continuous movement. When a person is tense, their head hurts or their joints hurt, they say that if your joints hurt, you shouldn't move. On the contrary, you need to move, but in a way that is more or less comfortable for you, meaning if your joints are very painful, walk slowly, but for a very long time. In any case, when a person does this, stationary position of the body and prolonged walking, they gradually remove this energy of aging, tension, and the joints stop hurting. Most often, infertility is also a type of tension. Let's say a woman can't conceive. In 80% of cases, she needs static and dynamic exercises, the ones I just told you about, and she brings herself out of the state of infertility. And the third type of aging is excessive heat in the body. This leads to ulcers, allergies, and inflammatory processes in the body. These are severe and difficult to treat diseases such as lupus, various immune disorders, and severe infections. All of this indicates excessive heat in the body. And it is treated with fasting and static exercises. That means standing still and fasting. In other words, you need asceticism practice and nature, and that's it. All this time you need to spend a lot of time in nature, because when you do asceticism practice, the energy of nature begins to enter you. And if you do asceticism practice indoors, then you need to at least go out into nature afterwards. Let's say you were running on a treadmill. You still need to go out to breathe fresh air afterwards. Stand there for a while so that the energy of nature enters you. Otherwise, it won't be able to heal you. Do you understand that if a person wants to live, they must do asceticism practice? And these asceticism practices overcome their fate. 2.5 years ago, I gradually started running more and more, understanding this method. The following things happened in my body consecutively. The first thing that happened, I had never lost weight in my life. I started losing weight and gradually lost 10 kilograms. When I fasted, I didn't lose weight. But when I started running, after 40 minutes of running, I began to lose weight. I lost 10 kilograms. The second thing that happened, my right knee started hurting. It hurt for 6 months. And my friend said, "You shouldn't run because your knees wear out. The internet says so." I said that I know better what I need and what I don't need. And for 6 months, my right knee hurt. Then it stopped hurting and both hips started hurting. They hurt for 6 months, then stopped hurting. Then my left knee started hurting and stopped. Then my heart started hurting. Imagine I'm running and my heart hurts. My friends say, "You see, we warned you." My heart hurt for 3 months and then it hurt no more. Now I run for an hour and a half and nothing hurts at all. I'm 52 years old. Nothing hurts and I'm not out of breath. I run for an hour and a half at a speed of 9 kilometers per hour. I'm not out of breath and nothing hurts. I feel much better. I have robust health. Although 5 years ago, I started to feel that I was getting tired from traveling. I've been living on the road for 20 years. I do stationary exercises once every 5 days for 2.5 hours. Every day I only have lunch. I don't eat anything in the morning. Because the body's healing only happens in the morning, it's enough to fast until lunch. It doesn't have to be every day. I don't eat anything until lunch every day. Everything unnecessary in my body gets burned. Once every 5 days I do static exercises for 2.5 hours. Once every 5 days I run 12 kilometers. That's it. My health is robust. I have solid health. Nothing hurts at all. Nothing needs to be treated. A person only becomes sick when they've given up. For example, they were told, now you need to walk less because your joints are sick, and they will never become healthy. If you believe this, that's it. You'll start dying from then on. Well, gradually, of course, not in 5 minutes. Then the doctor will tell you, get ready for death. If you're overweight and you think that's how it should be, it means you've already given up, and so on. That's about health. Now about life. Remember, there is only one force that gives a person a normal life with other people. It's helping people. That's why we created the club, so that you understand this. These people who attend this club are learning to live not for themselves. They spend their personal time, they find time to feed the poor, do good deeds, clean up the city, and so on. They find time for this because they have difficulties in life. Some have difficulty with work. Some have difficulty in the family, some have difficulties with salary, and so on. All this means lack of love for people, lack of helping others, because when a person starts caring for others, all these difficulties in their life are destroyed, because that's how this world is designed. In fact, if you're not married, it means you lack love for the people who lead you to marriage. If you don't have a good position in society, then you lack this power of love for people who lead you to a good position in society. If you're not married, specifically, this power is called caring for people. Caring for people makes a woman so beautiful that she knocks men off their feet. They can't resist the beauty. It's impossible, simply unreal. If a man respects elders, respects authorities, and treats his parents kindly, then he accumulates such strength that his social status will grow unequivocally without any doubt. If a person works with love, finds a desire to do something for others with love, forgets about money, they cannot live without work. They will always have a job, 100% sure. And if they want to live without work, they are simply asked to work. People will search for such a person and say, please come to us, we really need you. For example, I love my work. If I, God forbid, don't give lectures, they will simply pester me. Dr. Torsunov, come on, please. And if you feel that your life has stopped, you are in depression, it's impossible for you to change anything in your personal life, you're being put in prison, you're in terrible debts that you will never repay in your life, or you feel that you're not living where you should, not the way you should, you have no life at all, you are totally in depression. This means that you lack only one thing in life, a relationship with God. That's all. Because any of the most difficult fates can only be overcome with this help. If you simply start praying, you will see how all of this begins to crumble. The heaviest debts are destroyed. The most severe loneliness is destroyed. The most difficult work situation is destroyed. All difficult situations are simply destroyed when a person starts thinking about God and praying to Him. Try to first just understand and believe that this is true. If everything I've told you up to this point has some logic, it can be understood somehow, then what I'm saying now, you won't be able to understand. You just need to start doing it, and you'll see how it works. Because this is the most difficult thing, to understand how to overcome fate through prayer. This is the most difficult thing in life, but it's also the most important thing in life, because without this, life is meaningless. There are people among you who in their previous life already prayed and reached this state of understanding how God overcomes fate. And if in this life you're not doing the same thing, then God won't give you your personal happiness until you start serving Him. And such people also come to me and I tell them, until you start thinking about God, you won't get any happiness in this life, because in your previous life you achieved great results. And you yourself in your past life didn't want to live below that level, but a person develops from infancy. They don't remember anything that happened before. And until a person starts on this path of serving God, they can't find peace in life. Nothing works out for them because they achieved great results before. This is also very important to know. According to the Vedas, God is compared to the sun, and a person who goes to God is compared to a person who goes towards the sun. Like in the song, On the Road of Goodness, ask strict life, which road to take? In the Vedas, the soul is compared to a spark, and God to the sun. When a spark flies away from the sun, it fades away. Everyone knows this. When a person lives thinking about their own concerns, their own family, they always fade away. A person should stop living with their own concerns. They should start living with the concerns of others. This is a revolution in life. They must detach from themselves. They should earn money to give to the poor, detach from the desire for happiness from a loved one. Simply give this happiness to them. Detach from the desire for your mother to call and call your mother yourself, and so on. So you need to try to overcome yourself every moment. And this is the road of goodness. But until you follow God, you won't have the strength for this. That means the main problem is in strength. Remember this: if a person lives in prayer, they gain the strength to do good deeds. And if not, then they do not gain it. Your tree of love is gaining strength now. This is 100% sure. We'll meet in a year. You'll tell me how it became easier for you, how you fought for your fate, how everyone stopped understanding you, relatives got scared of what's happening to you, how you changed your diet, your daily routine. You'll tell me how your husband then also slowly started to live differently, even though he said that he knows all this himself, and that it's not you changing him, but he's changing you, and so on. All this will definitely happen in your life, for sure. Thank you very much. I wish you all happiness, love, spiritual knowledge, all the best in your family. I wish you to remain faithful to your faith, your family, your country, and your conscience. Thank you very much for being with me. I appreciate all of you. To learn more on the subject of health and healing of the body, please make sure to read my health guide, available for download on my YouTube channel or on my Instagram page. Thank you very much, and see you soon.